In January 2024, the venerable British news magazine The Economist published an article titled "Why You Should Never Retire." The article was widely discussed, including in the subreddit Fluent in Finance. The vast majority of comments on that thread were of the "you want us to work until we die, don't you?" variety. One of the most sensible commenters said, "It's not whether or not you should retire. It's whether or not you have something fulfilling to do in retirement. And therein lies my dilemma. I'm still working, but on weekends my life seems to fall apart. I sleep for 15 to 16 hours straight. When I reluctantly wake up, I don't know what to do with myself." Hence, I find the premise of the article oddly relevant. Let me now quote a few lines from the article itself. Can anything truly replace the framework and buzz of being part of the action? You can have a packed diary devoid of deadlines, meetings, and spreadsheets and flourish as a consumer of theater matinees, art exhibitions, and badminton lessons. Hobbies are all well and good for many, but for the extremely driven, they can feel pointless and even slightly embarrassing. That is because there is depth in being useful, and excitement, even in significantly lower doses than are typical earlier in a career, can act as an anti-aging serum. So what do you all feel about this? I only saw the article today. It popped up on one of my feeds. That's why I'm sharing it a year and a half after it was published. This topic is of perennial interest, so I hope people will not mind the delayed exposure. Story 1. I think my ultimate thoughts on the matter are that people have different wants and needs. That article did not seem to take into consideration that some people work very difficult jobs, and the case they made seemed to primarily or exclusively consider people working in relatively easy, highly paid office jobs, where fulfillment comes from either performing an important function or from socializing and networking. Personally, the concept of work offends my sensibilities, and I get no joy or fulfillment from it. Story 2. I think it's nonsense because the most fulfilling parts of my life are outside of work. I work a 9 to 5, and for much of my career, I have worked way more than regular hours. I generally enjoy what I do, and some of the challenges I work on are fascinating. I would still choose this career today like I did when I started it. That being said, it is still a job that lets me pay for the things I truly care about. I have volunteered with multiple organizations over the years and felt more fulfilled doing that than working, even when it was hard. I have spent time with friends and worked on personal projects, and I don't know how to fit it all into my weekends. If I could support myself and plan for my family's future while working half as much or not at all, I would do it in a second. The way you describe your life makes you sound exactly like the kind of person this article was written for. Someone too burned out by work and too alienated from life outside of it to imagine anything else being fulfilling or worthwhile. Story 3. So clickbait title with a more reasonable argument. If the idea is that people should be open to doing something once they reach retirement age, I am not opposed to that. Many people still need something to do even after they have put in their time in the workforce. What that activity is can vary in type and number. Some people may work a part-time job to stay busy. Others may get involved in various organizations. Some with more financial reserves may do a lot of traveling. I am currently at a workplace where some of the oldest co-workers I have, in their 60s, will work here until they physically cannot do so. While I may not know their financial situations, I suspect it has more to do with their desire to keep working than a need to continue working since they have put in enough time to benefit from their pensions. Story 4. It very much depends on the person. Some people do work they love and become so invested in it that they do not want to walk away from it, or at least not entirely. That is fine. However, most people end up in jobs they do not particularly like but do only to survive. At the same time, there is an erosion of the social safety net in countries with aging populations, where the number of young people available to support retirees is shrinking while the number of retirees is growing. This leads to efforts to increase the retirement age. In that context, an article with a sensational headline suggesting you should work until you die, from a publication known to be much more friendly to the business class than to ordinary people, generates a certain amount of understandable and intended backlash. Story 5. I feel that The Economist can kiss my sweaty balls. There is infinitely more depth in being useless. Story 6. I have a dream of doing nothing. That sounds fabulous. I have been working since I was 14 and, other than vacations, have literally never had a block of time when I was not working. However, I will also never be able to retire, so there is that. Story 7. I think that article is more for people who were fortunate enough to have spent their careers doing something they love or find very meaningful, in which case there is no reason to stop. I can see how people who feel their job is slowly harming them and cannot wait to stop might be offended by this idea. Story 8. I like my job. I plan to retire to the Philippines in my early 40s to live my life on a tropical beach with my wife. Story 9. Retirement was not common until very recent history. Working in some capacity until death was the norm for almost everyone until the Industrial Revolution. When Social Security or its equivalent started, it was established around the average age of death, and there were 20 to 40 workers for every retiree. Now people live longer, but retirement age has not substantially changed. As the population ages, there will be fewer workers for each retired person every year for the remainder of the century. Even if birth rates increase significantly, it would take 18 to 25 years for those children to start their careers, and new workers typically earn less income. Unless retirees are removed from the system immediately, taxes will have to increase and benefits will have to decrease. This is basic mathematics. If and when the situation improves, it will take about 2 decades to see any impact. Even if every penny of wealth from all billionaires were taken, it would not change the fundamental math. No effective solution has been found because this situation has not occurred before on a global scale. It has only happened regionally. Story 10. What does it say about the kind of people who write for The Economist that whenever they talk about finding fulfillment or a purpose in life, their family never crosses their mind? Story 11. It should be why we should not have billionaires. Retirement used to be a reward for putting in your time. The greedy elite class has taken the years we were once guaranteed before they lowered us into poverty. Story 12. I am not planning on retiring. I would love to move to teaching and mentoring and, in the end, just share my experiences. Do not get me wrong, I will be receiving my retirement, but I plan to stay active. Story 13. I can be part of the action in my free time too. Whoever wrote that should probably look into it and maybe make a friend or two. Story 14. Clickbait title with a reasonable argument. Many seniors work or volunteer part-time for social interaction and mental stimulation. Some people genuinely love working. They are a small group, but they do exist. This is especially true for those who abandoned many of their hobbies while working a 9-to-5 job. Getting back into something you used to be good at can be a very frustrating experience. Additionally, if your hobbies involve sports, you may not be able to play as you age. Many men my father's age are hanging up their skates because even recreational leagues are too demanding for them. Story 15. They are The Economist. It makes sense that they find their joy and self-worth from having and making money. But I have known too many sad rich people to think that is what works for everyone. I get joy in my life from many places. I even like my job. But given the choice between going to work and being free to pursue my own passions, I would quit my job. Story 16. Can anything truly replace the framework and buzz of being part of the action? You can have a packed diary without deadlines, meetings, and spreadsheets and flourish as a consumer of theater matinees, art exhibitions, and badminton lessons. Hobbies are all well and good for many, but for the extremely driven, they can feel pointless and even slightly embarrassing. That is because there is depth in being useful. Excitement, even in significantly lower doses than typical earlier in a career, can act as an anti-aging serum. I think if you are the kind of person who finds most of your fulfillment in life from your career, which I assume the readership of The Economist tends to lean heavily towards, then this probably rings true. Personally, I work to live. I do not live to work. I have no trouble finding fulfilling and interesting things to do when I am not working, and I have no doubt that will continue when I am retired. Story 17. Retirement is a financial equation that many people will never balance. But for those who do, there also needs to be a purpose and a life outside of their employment that makes retirement worthwhile. Story 18. I'm sorry, I'm not motivated by work, but I will likely have to work until I die anyway. That said, my father lasted 6 whole months in retirement because he never had a hobby. My mother is fine sitting on the couch with her computers. My 76-year-old mother is a computer enthusiast, but my father couldn't do it. He is 81 and has worked 30 hours a week for the last 10 years. I have hobbies that keep me busy. Story 19. My dad retired a couple of years ago from actuarial consulting, and after a brief period of playing a lot of golf, he started teaching nearly full-time at a local parochial school. My mom has basically done the same thing and now helps keep the books at that school. Both seem to be having a lot of fun. They both work much less than they used to, but they are staying busy, as they say. The distinction I make is like camping versus being homeless. Despite sharing many of the same activities, the former is fun, and the latter is very unpleasant because you can stop camping anytime if it becomes uncomfortable. My parents' situation would be much worse if my dad had been pushed out of his primary career and had to teach just to avoid living in poverty. I think I will end up doing the same thing once I retire. The retired engineers teaching calculus at the community college seem to be enjoying themselves. Story 20. It seems quite individualistic. If you find or found purpose in your work as many do, then there is something to the idea. How many elderly workers do we have in the postal service? Too many. But of course, no one bothers to read the article. They just read the title and think it is some hit piece put out by wealthy billionaires. Newsflash. Billionaires do not know you and do not care about what you think. You are a non-player character to them. Story 21. I would consider it a tremendous failure in my life to die working. I have things going on outside of my work. Eventually, I do not want to spend my days working. Story 22. Found the article and read it. Very disappointed. Some surface musings dropping Warren Buffett's name and popular culture references. There was no conclusion or argument presented, just a series of descriptions. Story 23. I'm still working, but on weekends my life seems to fall apart. I sleep for 15 to 16 hours straight. When I reluctantly wake up, I don't know what to do with myself. Tell me this. In times when you don't know what to do with yourself, do you wish you were back at work? Maybe you do. I don't know. I know for many people that's not the case. But their time and mental energy have been so occupied by work that they don't have the capacity to do anything else. All I know is that if I had the means to live without serving a wealthy person and making them richer, I would, and I'd find things to do. There are other online communities, such as the Financial Independence subreddit, that can probably help better than I can. Story 24. This conversation is simple. Would you be happier working in some capacity or retiring altogether? The answer depends on what you feel would make you more fulfilled. That is the entire conversation. Story 25. It is as if the writer has never heard of retired individuals volunteering in their community to improve everyone's lives. Story 26. If you value feeling like you are a meaningful part of a larger purpose and want deadlines and responsibilities to hold significance, consider returning to take up a charity job. This way, you can do some good for the world with your retirement subsidized time. Life should not be only about work. Work should allow you to live. However, if you need structure to keep yourself from slipping, there is always an answer in charity work. Story 27. Keeping busy is definitely the goal in retirement. If you are someone who does not have any interests, then perhaps working is for the best. I highly recommend you start taking classes of different kinds to see what you like. You could be a carpenter, reupholster furniture, learn to day trade, train dogs, start a club, or pursue any other number of activities. Story 28. Can anything truly replace the framework and excitement of being part of the action? Yes, you either detach yourself from that nonsense or find a hobby that provides a similar structure. There are many activities that, if you keep yourself disciplined and constantly busy, can support a path of continuous self-improvement. And therein lies my dilemma. I'm still working, but on weekends my life seems to fall apart. I sleep for 15 to 16 hours straight. No offense, but you sound like a non-player character. Are you really saying there is no other activity outside of work that keeps you engaged? Have you tried and actually put effort into finding something to occupy your time? On my average weekend, I have too much to do. I always have a long list of projects, house repairs, car repairs, and various other tasks I want to complete during my time off, while trying to maintain other ongoing skills like playing guitar or violin. Story 29. Depends on the individual. If you make your career your life, retirement is basically a death sentence. If you have fulfilling hobbies and recreational aspirations, retire as early as possible. Story 30. I worked with many baby boomers who retired recently. Most were truly done with work and had plenty of other things they wanted to spend time on, such as their family, hobbies, travel, volunteer work, studying something, or even doing some part-time freelance jobs. A person who, after 71 years of age, still wants to do hardcore work is rare. I have also seen many older people who really needed retirement because they could no longer do their jobs well. Don't forget, retired people often still do labor, such as watching grandchildren. This may be unpaid but can still be demanding. Story 31. I am not passionate about my work, and I do not care what happens at my job beyond my ability to keep it and maintain a paycheck to do the things I really want to do. If I had enough money, I would give my 2 weeks notice because I like the people on my team even if I do not like the job, and work until the 2 weeks are up or they choose to let me go sooner. I have plenty going on in my life to keep me busy outside of work. Friends and family to visit, games to play, movies and shows to watch, places to visit, and all kinds of things I would rather be doing than working. Aside from that, I hate being tied to a rigid schedule someone else has set for me. Being free of that would be more freeing than anything else I can think of. If I did not have work, I would find more things I want to do to fill the time. I have no shortage of things to do, just a lack of time to do them. Story 32. I feel that since 2021 or 2022, there has definitely been an increase in articles like this. It seems that large companies are looking ahead and do not want to lose their labor force. Additionally, they need to pay less in retirement benefits if people continue working. Story 33. I think the headline is more inflammatory than the article since the article is not stating that this is for everyone. People who thrive on having a busy, productive life find fulfillment in that and want to continue should. There is nothing wrong with not wanting to retire if you are able to do the job, like it, and want to keep doing it. If that is what you live for, have fun. I have certainly seen some individuals of that nature adjust very poorly to retirement and decline rapidly. The central message I get from it is simple. You should figure out what you want out of life and do that rather than following a generic script of, well, you are X years old, so this is what you do, or, well, you have enough money to comfortably retire. Time to go buy a house in Florida and devote yourself to sunbathing. Story 34. I understand the importance of staying busy and having something to do. The contrast between my wife's grandfather and mine is stark. Her grandfather had very little outside of work when he retired and experienced mental decline. My grandfather, on the other hand, had many hobbies, mainly woodworking and golfing, and remained sharp until he passed away at 90. That said, hobbies are a great way to keep busy. Story 35. I have been retired for 3 years now, 66 years old. There were very few people that I missed from work, but not nearly enough to want to go back. My life is wonderful now, and retirement is one of the 3 best things I have ever done with my life. Story 36. Everyone is different. Yes, there are people who would probably die of boredom after retiring, but personally, I live for my time outside of work and will gladly exchange work for relaxing and fully enjoying my hobbies. Story 37. For the vast majority of people, work facilitates the flow of money from customers, shareholders, or owners. Very few jobs offer any real opportunity to make a difference in people's lives, which means the only reason to do them is in exchange for the money necessary to pursue other, more enjoyable or fulfilling activities. The distinction between working and retirement is not in how much you work, but in who you are working for and why. Cooking as a hobby for the enjoyment of yourself and your family in retirement is much more meaningful than cooking 40 meals for strangers you never see so some restaurant chain can meet their third quarter sales projections. Story 38. I am of the opinion that what you need is a meaningful role in something greater than yourself, one that gives you a social network and framework. Whether that is spending time with your family, helping run a volunteer or civil service group, serving on the board of a charity or foundation, doing a job that people appreciate or furthering a cause. Doing something good and meaningful in the world and having an active social network. Often, Responsibility equals meaning. Story 39. Having had a few older relatives die soon after retiring, I think there is some truth to the premise, but correlation is not causation. I believe it is important for a person to have meaning in their life, whether retired or not, and it is perfectly fine if that meaning looks very different between people. It does not need to be profound nor justified to anyone, but it is good to have meaning for your own sake. I am looking forward to retiring, but I do not expect to stop enjoying helping people as I am able. I did not read the article, so I may have missed the point, but I enjoy engaging with strangers on the internet. Story 40. It depends on how you define retirement. For some people, it means never working again. For others, it means never having to work for money again. I agree that a person should avoid retirement in the former sense. There is a lot of good and important work to be done in the world, and we owe it to each other and to ourselves to be tireless doers of good work. The world needs these efforts, and I would say that ethics and honor demand that we be industrious in our noble efforts. My old friend Theodore Roosevelt said it best. Far and away the best prize that life has to offer is the chance to work hard at work worth doing. Story 41. The Economist is essentially British intelligence. It is British Crown propaganda, but I still check it to see their messaging. They appear to be promoting the idea that retirement is bad and undesirable. This suggests plans to raise the retirement age or cut benefits. This is understandable. Our demographics are top-heavy, and we cannot afford to pay many elderly people to be idle. There are too many retirees relative to the few current workers. They are attempting to reduce public outrage when this unpopular measure is implemented. Story 42. I've noticed throughout my life that people who retire tend to diminish physically and mentally quickly if they do not have something else to replace the time they previously spent engaged in work and interacting with others. Although work can sometimes feel like a burden, it provides significant stimulation that must be replaced to maintain the same level of physical and mental capabilities. This does not mean that you should never retire, but just as retirement planning requires planning for replacement income, it should also include planning for how to maintain the same levels of physical and mental stimulation. For many people, that often means getting another job. Story 43. The snippet you quote sounds like typical media establishment rhetoric pushing conformity to capitalism and the pyramid model of social order. Some people get a lot of fulfillment from their careers. I get a fair amount and consider myself lucky in that. But I also get plenty of fulfillment from making dinner, reading a book, riding my bike, listening to music, pruning trees, conversations, and home repair. I intend to retire soon and have no concern about feeling unfulfilled or lost in a sea of empty hours. So I have to say it sounds like you have a personal problem. I don't know if propaganda and other social pressures have alienated you from an instinctive joy in existing that you once had, or if that's something you never found in the first place. But I sincerely hope you find a way to connect with it. I don't have any specific suggestions for reading or therapy, but a professional therapist may be helpful. Your ability to recognize and clearly articulate your situation suggests you're further along the road to real fulfillment than many. Please don't give up. Story 44. The person who said that is incorrect. I have been retired for almost 15 years. Not everyone has the consumer mindset. Story 45. Some people use their job as a reason to get up in the morning. For them, working until they die is a definite probability. For the rest of us, our jobs are a reason we can afford to live. So, working to live is the mantra, not living to work. Story 46. The article strikes me as not serious personally. Here are two lines that are humorous. For example, once you retire after 32 years as a lawyer at the World Bank, you can begin to split your time between photography and scrounging flea markets for a collection of Americana. When this guest Bartleby entered the job market, she assumed that when the day came she too would be a pensioner in a pastel-colored shirt opting for the early bird special. And this line would not make any sense if it was a serious article. Hobbies are all well and good for many, but for the extremely driven, they can feel pointless and even slightly embarrassing. If this was a serious article, why was it not titled, "Why You Should Never Retire If You Are Extremely Driven"? It seems like the logical counter to the article's title is, "Well, I am not extremely driven, so I should retire." But if it is not a serious article, then it does not really matter. Story 47. A 66-year-old male retired for 6 years here. I worked for an old friend who was the chief executive officer on a part-time basis, 30 hours per week, for about 10 months after being retired for about a year. I quit because I got tired of a 25-minute commute, even though I enjoyed the work. First of all, retirement is awesome. The Economist is wrong. I had a challenging and rewarding career as a field engineer for an expensive and sophisticated brain imaging device. In my job, I traveled all over the United States and Canada. I also had customers in Germany, France, and Japan that I would visit for emergency repairs or planned preventative maintenance. I worked from home when I was not traveling, just answering emails and calls sometimes. My company's headquarters was in Vancouver, and I lived in Southern California, so I only saw my boss once a year when they flew me to the Christmas party. I was well paid and had a generous expense account whenever I traveled. I am not trying to be boastful, just saying I had a fantastic job. Interesting, challenging, and fulfilling. My job was a large part of my identity. For the record, I am only describing the last 10 years. The 35 years before that were a grind. So now you know my perspective on work, and I am here to tell you retirement is better, and it is not even close. You have to keep busy with hobbies and interests. You need to remain physically fit. You need to have some sort of social network. You need to have saved or invested enough money to be comfortable. I often say, I am not rich, I am retired. What's interesting is that engineers and physicists like me are often the people who die at their desks. Some people just want to keep on keeping on in their routine. I wish them the happiness they seek. As for me, I like doing whatever I want whenever I want to. My wife and I have a great life without dogs. We have loving, interesting, and fun relationships with our children. And life is good. Story 48. It is a steaming pile of nonsense. It is fine to be fulfilled by your paid employment, but if paid employment is your only source of fulfillment, something is wrong. I specify paid employment for a reason. We all need to work. It is what keeps us alive and moving forward. Cooking meals, reading a book, hiking a trail, building birdhouses with your children or grandchildren, tending your flower garden. These activities are work, but you are likely not being paid to do them. Yet we do these activities anyway because they are enjoyable and give us a sense of purpose and joy. Humans are not machines, much as the modern world wants us to be, and too many people have lost sight of this fact. Paid employment is the work you do to earn money to operate and live. Since our world is set up to require money, even off-grid living requires at least some cash, so unless you are privileged, it is unavoidable. If I woke up tomorrow with enough funds in my retirement account or won the lottery, I would walk into work, drop my identification on my boss's desk, and leave without looking back or giving another thought to performing paid employment again. It is a means to an end, nothing more, and when it is no longer relevant, it does not deserve mental energy. I have enough hobbies and interests to keep me going for a couple of lifetimes. Story 49. Sounds like a great way to prepare baby boomers all over the Western region for the news that the funds are empty. Story 50. I think sentiments like this obscure the fact that aging human bodies often do not fit our capitalist lifestyle. Health and cognition decline over time just like everything else. The article seems to focus on a modern, modestly wealthy person's retirement rather than the historical basis for retirement, which is the difficulty of keeping up with jobs such as construction or manufacturing as one ages. Story 51. Whoever wrote that must have been trolling. Can anything truly replace the framework and excitement of being part of the action? You can have a packed diary without deadlines, meetings, and spreadsheets. Yes, there are many things in life that can replace the excitement of spreadsheets. Story 52. I think two things are true. One, even if you do not have a job, you need something to work on. People need structure and a sense of purpose. This is from the article. Two, if you are willing to earn some amount of money during retirement, you can retire much earlier than if you think, I never want to earn a paycheck again. It is like changing careers to something you love from age 45 to 77 versus starting to do nothing at 70. Story 53. I think it is about staying intellectually, physically, and socially active. For many people, especially men, Most of their social and intellectual engagement occurs through work. If they have busy jobs, there is a good chance they are not physically active either. I am in my 50s and have a variety of hobbies that keep me mentally challenged, physically active, and socially engaged. Hopefully that is enough. Story 54. It might be only valid for white-collar workers, but for blue-collar workers, it is just insanity as they rely more on physical strength, which diminishes with age. Story 55. They keep asking chief executive officers and executives for their opinions whenever articles like this come out. Of course, you can still function in a do-nothing job at 90. If all I had to do all day was tell some poor person to fetch the quarterly reports and make an appointment for Mitzi the masseuse while I count my money, I don't think I would retire either. Story 56. Capitalist propaganda tries to exploit working people for the benefit of corporations. Story 57. I retired in 2022. I will never stop working because what else am I going to do? Sit all day? Story 58. I might be more interested in working longer if I did not have to work so much now. Give me a 3-day work week and maybe I would not have to be so focused on reaching retirement so I can actually enjoy some of my life. Thanks a bunch for sticking around till the end of the video. Remember to subscribe and until next time, stay awesome and goodbye.